He's got to do something more in terms of reaching out to independent voters. So tonight, you have two audiences. In a polarized America, you have, I think, Democrats who want to hear talk about something to do with infrastructure, something to do with health care in specific, something to do with helping our economy, especially in terms of the middle class. And I think for Republicans, they want to hear about the wall, illegal immigration, terror. So he's got two big audiences. But for him, he's got to build up his numbers to make himself credible to fellow Republicans, especially in the Senate, who look like they may be breaking away.
The president's cabinet, there you see the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, Ben Carson there. The designated survivor tonight, the Energy Secretary, Rick Perry. There you see the acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, as the cabinet comes in.
Let's take a moment to listen to the action down on the floor as we pause for the top of the hour here. President Trump is just minutes away, and our special coverage of tonight's State of the Union address continues in just a few moments.
A live look at the U.S. Capitol, a beautiful evening here in Washington after a run of cold, bitter weeks, both in terms of weather and politics. Now looking live inside the House chamber. We're just moments away from President Trump and tonight's State of the Union address. Good evening again from Washington. I'm Brett Baer.
And good evening, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum. So any moment now, President Trump will be announced on the House floor with the familiar call of the Sergeant at Arms. He will make his way down the aisle, greeted by lawmakers. Everybody always sort of scrambling for that position to shake the president's hand. Republicans and Democrats on both sides of the aisle as he will move his way through the chamber in just a few moments.
Then he'll lay out this agenda, talk to lawmakers and to you, the American people, talking about what he's accomplished and what he wants to accomplish as you look at the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is on the North Lawn with a quick preview of what we can expect to hear. John.
Brad, Martha, good evening to you. For all the talk of unity at the White House today about the State of the Union, there is an issue that causes a lot of division that the president will hammer home tonight, and that is on immigration. The president will say that the United States has a moral obligation to provide for the lives and jobs of its citizens, not those from other countries. The president will also say that immigration really illuminates the divide between working class Americans and the political elite who often themselves hide behind armed guards and walls. The president will seek to find common ground on issues like rebuilding America's crumbling infrastructure and lowering the cost of prescription drugs. In a nod to foreign policy, we expect that he is going to announce that he is going to have his next summit with Kim Jong-un of North Korea February 27th and 28th. The location to the country to be Vietnam. We have not been told the city specifically, but we're being led to believe that that will be Da Nang. The president will also say that great nations do not fight endless wars, a nod to what's going on in Afghanistan and his desire to pull out of there at some point and his desire to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. So it's a speech that encompasses a number of different themes. Some of them he hopes will bring the country together, but others by their very nature may keep the country apart. Brett and Martha.
John, thank you. As you look at the First Lady anxiously looking on, a different look, obviously, to this State of the Union with the new Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. She's been in that position before, but now she will be over the shoulder of President Donald Trump in a divided government. As you saw, Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, he's been working on the China issue, the negotiations with China, and that will be a big event as we wait for the Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving, to make his historic announcement.
Madam Speaker, the President of the United States.
This is the moment, Martha, that he was hoping for, delayed by 1 week because of the government shutdown. But it's hard to look at the pomp and circumstance of this moment and not think that this is a big moment for any president every year.
And you think about the discussions that were had then. Should he do it in front of the Senate? Should he potentially do it at some other venue? And it kind of, when you watch this, you realize that you want to wait the week. You want to do it the way it's supposed to be done, in front of a joint session of Congress, the members of the Supreme Court, the cabinet, really the largest gathering of its kind of all of the people of government that the president will address, and of course the people at home as well. So he's getting that moment 1 week delayed, and there's Nancy Pelosi clapping as the president walks in. They've had a lot of differences over the past week.
Dana, you've been on the other side of this, setting up a president walking down this aisle.
Well, and Brett, in particular, it was George W. Bush in 2007 who was the first to ever say, as president, Madam Speaker, in order to introduce the speech. And now you have Nancy Pelosi back at the helm.
A few of us were invited to a session with Nancy Pelosi on the record off camera this afternoon, and I asked her, had she thought at all, because it's going to be an interesting thing for the next hour or so. We're going to see the president speaking with Nancy Pelosi right over his left shoulder. I said, have you thought at all about your demeanor? She said, I haven't given it any thought at all. And then she proceeded to say, in effect, she had given it thought. She said, I am going to accord him the respect of the office that he holds, not the president, not Donald Trump, but I'm going to give respect to the office of the presidency. And she said, when it comes to the people in the caucus, she said, the House will be in order. If somebody is not going to be respectful of the president, we've made it clear you shouldn't be in the chamber.
Laura?
Well, I think this, again, boiling this 2 years down to a speech and forecasting forward, 400,000 manufacturing jobs, blue-collar wages rising for the first time in like 18 years at a median level. He's going to tout that this is an economy for all people, and we want to expand it, forging new political alliances, both on issues like trade and his non-interventionist foreign policy. There's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of meat in there that traditionally more left-leaning legislators would find attractive. So I think he's going to try to open that up tonight as well.
Juan, quickly.
Well, I think what's interesting, by the way, I just noticed on the walk down, he went pretty quickly. A lot of the people who typically are the hangers
take
on,
their time.
Yeah, they weren't there today. A little different. I will say that Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, already said the State of the Union America is not what the president will say. We're in need of a repair job, and he's talked about the failing economy for the middle class, health care, chaos under Trump, foreign policy uncertain. But I think the president is going to assert that he does have a vision. He knows a pathway forward in order to try again to re-energize his base in the aftermath of the shutdown and the fact that his poll numbers have gone down.
There's a challenge for Democrats, too, because there has to be some effort to get something done. It can't just be stepping up and saying, I'm opposed to Donald Trump, and they know that.
I think that's right. And I think that that's what you're going to see from Pelosi is the talk about infrastructure.
The 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, the First Lady of the United States, and my fellow Americans, we meet tonight at a moment of unlimited potential. As we begin a new Congress, I stand here ready to work with you to achieve historic breakthroughs for all Americans. Millions of our fellow citizens are watching us now gathered in this great chamber, hoping that we will govern not as two parties, but as one nation. The agenda I will lay out this evening is not a Republican agenda or a Democrat agenda. It's the agenda of the American people. Many of us have campaigned on the same core promises to defend American jobs and demand fair trade for American workers, to rebuild and revitalize our nation's infrastructure, to reduce the price of health care and prescription drugs, to create an immigration system that is safe, lawful, modern, and secure, and to pursue a foreign policy that puts America's interest first. There is a new opportunity in American politics if only we have the courage together to seize it. Victory is not winning for our party. Victory is winning for our country. This year, America will recognize two important anniversaries that show us the majesty of America's mission and the power of American pride. In June, we mark 75 years since the start of what General Dwight D. Eisenhower called the Great Crusade, the Allied liberation of Europe in World War II. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, 15,000 young American men jumped from the sky and 60,000 more stormed in from the sea to save our civilization from tyranny. Here with us tonight are three of those incredible heroes. Private First Class Joseph Riley, Staff Sergeant Irving Locker, and Sergeant Herman Zaitchik. Gentlemen, we salute you. In 2019, we also celebrate 50 years since brave young pilots flew 250,000 miles through space to plant the American flag on the face of the moon. Half a century later, we are joined by one of the Apollo 11 astronauts who planted that flag, Buzz Aldrin. Thank you, Buzz. This year, American astronauts will go back to space on American rockets. In the 20th century, America saved freedom, transformed science, redefined the middle class, and when you get down to it, there's nothing anywhere in the world that can compete with America. Now we must step boldly and bravely into the next chapter of this great American adventure. And we must create a new standard of living for the 21st century. An amazing quality of life for all of our citizens is within reach. We can make our communities safer, our families stronger, our culture richer, our faith deeper, and our middle class bigger and more prosperous than ever before. But we must reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good. Together, we can break decades of political stalemate. We can bridge old divisions, heal old wounds, build new coalitions, forge new solutions, and unlock the extraordinary promise of America's future. The decision is ours to make. We must choose between greatness or gridlock, results or resistance, vision or vengeance, incredible progress or pointless destruction. Tonight, I ask you to choose greatness. Over the last 2 years, my administration has moved with urgency and historic speed to confront problems neglected by leaders of both parties over many decades. In just over 2 years since the election, we have launched an unprecedented economic boom, a boom that has rarely been seen before. There's been nothing like it. We have created 5.3 million new jobs, and importantly added 600,000 new manufacturing jobs, something which almost everyone said was impossible to do. But the fact is, we are just getting started. Wages are rising at the fastest pace in decades and growing for blue-collar workers who I promised to fight for. They're growing faster than anyone else thought possible. Nearly 5 million Americans have been lifted off food stamps. The U.S. economy is growing almost twice as fast today as when I took office, and we are considered far and away the hottest economy anywhere in the world, not even close. Unemployment has reached the lowest rate in over half a century. African American, Hispanic American, and Asian American unemployment have all reached their lowest levels ever recorded. Unemployment for Americans with disabilities has also reached an all-time low. More people are working now than at any time in the history of our country. 157 million people at work. We passed a massive tax cut for working families and doubled the child tax credit. We virtually ended the estate tax, or death tax, as it is often called, on small businesses, for ranches, and also for family farms. We eliminated the very unpopular Obamacare individual mandate penalty. And to give critically ill patients access to life-saving cures, we passed, very importantly, Right to Try. My administration has cut more regulations in a short period of time than any other administration during its entire tenure. Companies are coming back to our country in large numbers, thanks to our historic reductions in taxes and regulations. And we have unleashed a revolution in American energy. The United States is now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas anywhere in the world. And now, for the first time in 65 years, we are a net exporter of energy. After 24 months of rapid progress, our economy is the envy of the world. Our military is the most powerful on earth by far, and America is again winning each and every day. Members of Congress, the state of our union is strong. That sounds so good. Our country is vibrant, and our economy is thriving like never before. On Friday, it was announced that we added another 304,000 jobs last month alone, almost double the number expected. An economic miracle is taking place in the United States, and the only thing that can stop it are foolish wars, politics, or ridiculous partisan investigations. If there is going to be peace and legislation, there cannot be war and investigation. It just doesn't work that way. We must be united at home to defeat our adversaries abroad. This new era of cooperation can start with finally confirming the more than 300 highly qualified nominees who are still stuck in the Senate, in some cases years and years waiting. Not right. The Senate has failed to act on these nominations, which is unfair to the nominees and very unfair to our country. Now is the time for bipartisan action. Believe it or not, we have already proven that that's possible. In the last Congress, both parties came together to pass unprecedented legislation to confront the opioid crisis, a sweeping new farm bill, historic VA reforms, and after 4 decades of rejection, we passed VA accountability so that we can finally terminate those who mistreat our wonderful veterans. And just weeks ago, both parties united for groundbreaking criminal justice reform. They said it couldn't be done. Last year, I heard through friends the story of Alice Johnson. I was deeply moved. In 1997, Alice was sentenced to life in prison as a first-time nonviolent drug offender. Over the next 22 years, she became a prison minister, inspiring others to choose a better path. She had a big impact on that prison population and far beyond. Alice's story underscores the disparities and unfairness that can exist in criminal sentencing and the need to remedy this total injustice. She served almost that 22 years and had expected to be in prison for the remainder of her life. In June, I commuted Alice's sentence. When I saw Alice's beautiful family greet her at the prison gates, hugging and kissing and crying and laughing, I knew I did something right. Alice is with us tonight, and she is a terrific woman. Terrific. Alice, please. Alice, thank you for reminding us that we always have the power to shape our own destiny. Thank you very much, Alice. Thank you very much. Inspired by stories like Alice's, my administration worked closely with members of both parties to sign the First Step Act into law. Big deal. It's a big deal. This legislation reformed sentencing laws that have wrongly and disproportionately harmed the African American community. The First Step Act gives nonviolent offenders the chance to re-enter society as productive, law-abiding citizens. Now, states across the country are following our lead. America is a nation that believes in redemption. We are also joined tonight by Matthew Charles from Tennessee. In 1996, at the age of 30, Matthew was sentenced to 35 years for selling drugs and related offenses. Over the next 2 decades, he completed more than 30 Bible studies, became a law clerk, and mentored many of his fellow inmates. Now Matthew is the very first person to be released from prison under the First Step Act. Matthew, please. Thank you, Matthew. Welcome home. Now, Republicans and Democrats must join forces again to confront an urgent national crisis. Congress has 10 days left to pass a bill that will fund our government, protect our homeland, and secure our very dangerous southern border. Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration and putting the ruthless coyotes, cartels, drug dealers, and human traffickers out of business. As we speak, large, organized caravans are on the march to the United States. We have just heard that Mexican cities, in order to remove the illegal immigrants from their communities, are getting trucks and buses to bring them up to our country in areas where there is little border protection. I have ordered another 3,750 troops to our southern border to prepare for this tremendous onslaught. This is a moral issue. The lawless state of our southern border is a threat to the safety, security, and financial well-being of all America. We have a moral duty to create an immigration system that protects the lives and jobs of our citizens. This includes our obligation to the millions of immigrants living here today who followed the rules and respected our laws. Legal immigrants enrich our nation and strengthen our society in countless ways. I want people to come into our country in the largest numbers ever, but they have to come in legally. Tonight I am asking you to defend our very dangerous southern border out of love and devotion to our fellow citizens and to our country. No issue better illustrates the divide between America's working class and America's political class than illegal immigration. Wealthy politicians and donors push for open borders while living their lives behind walls and gates and guards. Meanwhile, working-class Americans are left to pay the price for mass illegal immigration. Reduced jobs, lower wages, overburdened schools, hospitals that are so crowded you can't get in, increased crime, and a depleted social safety net. Tolerance for illegal immigration is not compassionate. It is actually very cruel. One in 3 women is sexually assaulted on the long journey north. Smugglers use migrant children as human pawns to exploit our laws and gain access to our country. Human traffickers and sex traffickers take advantage of the wide open areas between our ports of entry to smuggle thousands of young girls and women into the United States and to sell them into prostitution and modern-day slavery. Tens of thousands of innocent Americans are killed by lethal drugs that cross our border and flood into our cities, including meth, heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. The savage gang, MS-13, now operates in at least 20 different American states, and they almost all come through our southern border. Just yesterday, an MS-13 gang member was taken into custody for a fatal shooting on a subway platform in New York City. We are removing these gang members by the thousands, but until we secure our border, they're going to keep streaming right back in. Year after year, countless Americans are murdered by criminal, illegal aliens. I've gotten to know many wonderful angel moms and dads and families. No one should ever have to suffer the horrible heartache that they have had to endure. Here tonight is Deborah Bissell. Just 3 weeks ago, Deborah's parents Gerald and Sharon were burglarized and shot to death in their Reno, Nevada home by an illegal alien. They were in their 80s and are survived by 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and 20 great-grandchildren. Also here tonight are Gerald and Sharon's granddaughter, Heather, and great-granddaughter, Madison. To Deborah, Heather, Madison, please stand. Few can understand your pain. Thank you, and thank you for being here. Thank you very much. I will never forget, and I will fight for the memory of Gerald and Sharon, that it should never happen again. Not one more American life should be lost because our nation failed to control its very dangerous border. In the last 2 years, our brave ICE officers made 266,000 arrests of criminal aliens, including those charged or convicted of nearly 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, and 4,000 killings or murders. We are joined tonight by one of those law enforcement heroes, ICE Special Agent Elvin Hernandez. When Elvin was a boy, he and his family legally immigrated to the United States from the Dominican Republic. At the age of 8, Elvin told his dad he wanted to become a special agent. Today, he leads investigations into the scourge of international sex trafficking. Elvin says that if I can make sure these young girls get their justice, I've really done my job. Thanks to his work and that of his incredible colleagues, more than 300 women and girls have been rescued from the horror of this terrible situation. And more than 1,500 sadistic traffickers have been put behind bars. We will always support the brave men and women of law enforcement. And I pledge to you tonight that I will never abolish our heroes from ICE. Thank you. My administration has sent to Congress a common sense proposal to end the crisis on the southern border. It includes humanitarian assistance, more law enforcement, drug detection at our ports, closing loopholes that enable child smuggling, and plans for a new physical barrier or wall to secure the vast areas between our ports of entry. In the past, most of the people in this room voted for a wall, but the proper wall never got built. I will get it built. This is a smart, strategic, see-through steel barrier, not just a simple concrete wall. It will be deployed in the areas identified by the border agents as having the greatest need. And these agents will tell you where walls go up, illegal crossings go way, way down. San Diego used to have the most illegal border crossings in our country. In response, a strong security wall was put in place. This powerful barrier almost completely ended illegal crossings. The border city of El Paso, Texas, used to have extremely high rates of violent crime, one of the highest in the entire country, and considered one of our nation's most dangerous cities. Now, immediately upon its building, with a powerful barrier in place, El Paso is one of the safest cities in our country. Simply put, walls work and walls save lives. So let's work together, compromise, and reach a deal that will truly make America safe. As we work to defend our people's safety, we must also ensure our economic resurgence continues at a rapid pace. No one has benefited more from our thriving economy than women, who have filled 58% of the newly created jobs last year. Supposed to do that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All Americans can be proud that we have more women in the workforce than ever before. Don't sit yet. You're going to like this. And exactly 1 century after Congress passed the constitutional amendment giving women the right to vote, we also have more women serving in Congress than at any time before. That's great. Really great. And congratulations. That's great. As part of our commitment to improving opportunity for women everywhere, this Thursday, we are launching the first ever government-wide initiative focused on economic empowerment for women in developing countries. To build on, our incredible economic success, one priority is paramount: reversing decades of calamitous trade policies. So bad. We are now making it clear to China that after years of targeting our industries and stealing our intellectual property, the theft of American jobs and wealth has come to an end. Therefore, we recently imposed tariffs on $250 billion of Chinese goods, and now our Treasury is receiving billions and billions of dollars. But I don't blame China for taking advantage of us. I blame our leaders and representatives for allowing this travesty to happen. I have great respect for President Xi, and we are now working on a new trade deal with China. But it must include real structural change to end unfair trade practices, reduce our chronic trade deficit, and protect American jobs. Another historic trade blunder was the catastrophe known as NAFTA. I have met the men and women of Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, New Hampshire, and many other states whose dreams were shattered by the signing of NAFTA. For years, politicians promised them they would renegotiate for a better deal. But no one ever tried until now. Our new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, will replace NAFTA and deliver for American workers like they haven't had delivered to for a long time. I hope you can pass the USMCA into law so that we can bring back our manufacturing jobs in even greater numbers, expand American agriculture, protect intellectual property, and ensure that more cars are proudly stamped with our 4 beautiful words: Made in the USA. Tonight, I am also asking you to pass the United States Reciprocal Trade Act so that if another country places an unfair tariff on an American product, we can charge them the exact same tariff on the exact same product that they sell to us. Both parties should be able to unite for a great rebuilding of America's crumbling infrastructure. I know that Congress is eager to pass an infrastructure bill, and I am eager to work with you on legislation to deliver new and important infrastructure investment, including investments in the cutting-edge industries of the future. This is not an option. This is a necessity. The next major priority for me and for all of us should be to lower the cost of health care and prescription drugs and to protect patients with pre-existing conditions. Already as a result of my administration's efforts in 2018, drug prices experienced their single largest decline in 46 years. But we must do more. It's unacceptable that Americans pay vastly more than people in other countries for the exact same drugs, often made in the exact same place. This is wrong, this is unfair, and together we will stop it, and we'll stop it fast. I am asking Congress to pass legislation that finally takes on the problem of global freeloading and delivers fairness and price transparency for American patients, finally. We should also require drug companies, insurance companies, and hospitals to disclose real prices to foster competition and bring costs way down. No force in history has done more to advance the human condition than American freedom. In recent years, we have made remarkable progress in the fight against HIV and AIDS. Scientific breakthroughs have brought a once distant dream within reach. My budget will ask Democrats and Republicans to make the needed commitment to eliminate the HIV epidemic in the United States within 10 years. We have made incredible strides, incredible. Together, we will defeat AIDS in America and beyond. Tonight, I am also asking you to join me in another fight that all Americans can get behind, the fight against childhood cancer. Joining Melania in the gallery this evening is a very brave 10-year-old girl, Grace Eline. Every birthday, hi, Grace. Every birthday since she was 4, Grace asked her friends to donate to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. She did not know that one day she might be a patient herself. That's what happened. Last year, Grace was diagnosed with brain cancer. Immediately, she began radiation treatment. At the same time, she rallied her community and raised more than $40,000 for the fight against cancer. When Grace completed treatment last fall, her doctors and nurses cheered. They loved her. They still love her. With tears in their eyes as she hung up a poster that read, "Last day of chemo." Thank you very much, Grace. You are a great inspiration to everyone in this room. Thank you very much. Many childhood cancers have not seen new therapies in decades. My budget will ask Congress for $500 million over the next 10 years to fund this critical life-saving research. To help support working parents, the time has come to pass school choice for Americans' children. I am also proud to be the first president to include in my budget a plan for nationwide paid family leave so that every new parent has the chance to bond with their newborn child. There could be no greater contrast to the beautiful image of a mother holding her infant child than the chilling displays our nation saw in recent days. Lawmakers in New York cheered with delight upon the passage of legislation that would allow a baby to be ripped from the mother's womb moments from birth. These are living, feeling, beautiful babies who will never get the chance to share their love and their dreams with the world. And then we had the case of the governor of Virginia, where he stated he would execute a baby after birth. To defend the dignity of every person, I am asking Congress to pass legislation to prohibit the late-term abortion of children who can feel pain in the mother's womb. Let us work together to build a culture that cherishes innocent life. And let us reaffirm a fundamental truth. All children, born and unborn, are made in the holy image of God. The final part of my agenda is to protect American security. Over the last 2 years, we have begun to fully rebuild the United States military with $700 billion last year and $716 billion this year. We are also getting other nations to pay their fair share. Finally. For years, the United States was being treated very unfairly by friends of ours, members of NATO. But now we have secured, over the last couple of years, more than $100 billion of increase in defense spending from our NATO allies. They said it couldn't be done. As part of our military buildup, the United States is developing a state-of-the-art missile defense system. Under my administration, we will never apologize for advancing America's interests. For example, decades ago, the United States entered into a treaty with Russia in which we agreed to limit and reduce our missile capability. While we followed the agreement and the rules to the letter, Russia repeatedly violated its terms. It's been going on for many years. That is why I announced that the United States is officially withdrawing from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or INF Treaty. Perhaps we really have no choice. Perhaps we can negotiate a different agreement, adding China and others, or perhaps we can't, in which case we will outspend and out-innovate all others by far. As part of a bold new diplomacy, we continue our historic push for peace on the Korean Peninsula. Our hostages have come home. Nuclear testing has stopped, and there has not been a missile launch in more than 15 months. If I had not been elected President of the United States, we would right now, in my opinion, be in a major war with North Korea. Much work remains to be done, but my relationship with Kim Jong-un is a good one. Chairman Kim and I will meet again on February 27th and 28th in Vietnam. Two weeks ago, the United States officially recognized the legitimate government of Venezuela and its new president, Juan Guaido. We stand with the Venezuelan people in their noble quest for freedom, and we condemn the brutality of the Maduro regime, whose socialist policies have turned that nation from being the wealthiest in South America into a state of abject poverty and despair. Here in the United States, we are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country. America was founded on liberty and independence, and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free, and we will stay free. Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country. One of the most complex set of challenges we face, and have for many years, is in the Middle East. Our approach is based on principled realism, not discredited theories that have failed for decades to yield progress. For this reason, my administration recognized the true capital of Israel and proudly opened the American embassy in Jerusalem. Our brave troops have now been fighting in the Middle East for almost 19 years. In Afghanistan and Iraq, nearly 7,000 American heroes have given their lives. More than 52,000 Americans have been badly wounded. We have spent more than $7 trillion in fighting wars in the Middle East. As a candidate for president, I loudly pledged a new approach. Great nations do not fight endless wars. When I took office, ISIS controlled more than 20,000 square miles in Iraq and Syria just 2 years ago. Today, we have liberated virtually all of the territory from the grip of these bloodthirsty monsters. Now, as we work with our allies to destroy the remnants of ISIS, it is time to give our brave warriors in Syria a warm welcome home. I have also accelerated our negotiations to reach, if possible, a political settlement in Afghanistan. The opposing side is also very happy to be negotiating. Our troops have fought with unmatched valor, and thanks to their bravery, we are now able to pursue a possible political solution to this long and bloody conflict. In Afghanistan, my administration is holding constructive talks with a number of Afghan groups, including the Taliban. As we make progress in these negotiations, we will be able to reduce our troops' presence and focus on counterterrorism, and we will indeed focus on counterterrorism. We do not know whether we'll achieve an agreement But we do know that after 2 decades of war, the hour has come to at least try for peace. And the other side would like to do the same thing. It's time. Above all, friend and foe alike must never doubt this nation's power and will to defend our people. 18 years ago, violent terrorists attacked the USS Cole, and last month, American forces killed one of the leaders of that attack. We are honored to be joined tonight by Tom Wibberley, whose son, Navy seaman Craig Wibberley, was one of the 17 sailors we tragically lost. Tom, we vow to always remember the heroes of the USS Cole. Thank you, Tom. Decisively to confront the world's leading state sponsor of terror, the radical regime in Iran. It is a radical regime. They do bad, bad things. To ensure this corrupt dictatorship never acquires nuclear weapons, I withdrew the United States from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. We put in place the toughest sanctions ever imposed by us on a country. We will not avert our eyes from a regime that chants death to America and threatens genocide against the Jewish people. We must never ignore the vile poison of anti-Semitism or those who spread its venomous creed. With one voice, we must confront this hatred anywhere and everywhere it occurs. Just months ago, 11 Jewish Americans were viciously murdered in an anti-Semitic attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. SWAT officer Timothy Matson raced into the gunfire and was shot 7 times chasing down the killer, and he was very successful. Timothy has just had his 12th surgery, and he's going in for many more. But he made the trip to be here with us tonight. Officer Matson, please. Thank you. We are forever grateful. Thank you very much. Tonight, we are also joined by Pittsburgh survivor Judah Samet. He arrived at the synagogue as the massacre began. But not only did Judah narrowly escape death last fall, more than 7 decades ago, he narrowly survived the Nazi concentration camps. Today is Judah's 81st birthday. They wouldn't do that for me, Judah. Judah says he can still remember the exact moment nearly 75 years ago, after 10 months in a concentration camp, when he and his family were put on a train and told they were going to another camp. Suddenly, the train screeched to a very strong halt. A soldier appeared. Judah's family braced for the absolute worst. Then his father cried out with joy, "It's the Americans! It's the Americans!" Thank you. A second Holocaust survivor who is here tonight, Joshua Kaufman, was a prisoner at Dachau. He remembers watching through a hole in the wall of a cattle car as American soldiers rolled in with tanks. To me, Joshua recalls, the American soldiers were proof that God exists. And they came down from the sky. They came down from heaven. I began this evening by honoring 3 soldiers who fought on D-Day in the Second World War. One of them was Herman Zaitchik. But there is more to Herman's story. A year after he stormed the beaches of Normandy, Herman was one of the American soldiers who helped liberate Dachau. He was one of the Americans who helped rescue Joshua from that hell on earth. Almost 75 years later, Herman and Joshua are both together in the gallery tonight, seated side by side, here in the home of American freedom. Herman and Joshua, your presence this evening is very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Thank you. When American soldiers set out beneath the dark skies over the English Channel in the early hours of D-Day 1944, they were just young men of 18 and 19 hurtling on fragile landing craft toward the most momentous battle in the history of war. They did not know if they would survive the hour. They did not know if they would grow old. But they knew that America had to prevail. Their cause was this nation and generations yet unborn. Why did they do it? They did it for America. They did it for us. Everything that has come since our triumph over communism, our giant leaps of science and discovery, our unrivaled progress towards equality and justice, all of it is possible thanks to the blood and tears and courage and vision of the Americans who came before. Think of this Capitol. Think of this very chamber where lawmakers before you voted to end slavery, to build the railroads and the highways and defeat fascism, to secure civil rights, and to face down evil empires. Here tonight, we have legislators from across this magnificent republic. You have come from the rocky shores of Maine and the volcanic peaks of Hawaii, from the snowy woods of Wisconsin and the red deserts of Arizona, from the green farms of Kentucky and the golden beaches of California. Together we represent the most extraordinary nation in all of history. What will we do with this moment? How will we be remembered? I ask the men and women of this Congress, look at the opportunities before us. Our most thrilling achievements are still ahead. Our most exciting journeys still await. Our biggest victories are still to come. We have not yet begun to dream. We must choose whether we are defined by our differences or whether we dare to transcend them. We must choose whether we squander our great inheritance or whether we proudly declare that we are Americans. We do the incredible. We defy the impossible. We conquer the unknown. This is the time to reignite the American imagination. This is the time to search for the tallest summit and set our sights on the brightest star. This is the time to rekindle the bonds of love and loyalty and memory that link us together as citizens, as neighbors, as patriots. This is our future, our fate, and our choice to make. I am asking you to choose greatness. No matter the trials we face, no matter the challenges to come, we must go forward together. We must keep America first in our hearts. We must keep freedom alive in our souls. And we must always keep faith in America's destiny. That one nation, under God, must be the hope and the promise and the light and the glory among all the nations of the world. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And there you have it. Handshakes for Vice President Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. President Trump, in a speech that was just a tad longer than last year, about an hour and 22 minutes. It started with a look back at American history as we enter the 75th anniversary of D-Day and the 50th anniversary of men landing on the moon. Then the speech circled back there in some very moving moments with World War II soldiers at the end, which we'll talk more about in a moment. The president also spoke of the next chapter of this great American adventure, as he called it, saying that we must create a new standard of living for the 21st century. He called for stronger families, deeper faith, and greater prosperity. He also heralded some of the economic successes as he sees them of his administration over the past year, saying, quote, "We are just getting started." He then segued into what he hopes can be a bipartisan action on the border. Democrats have slammed the wall, saying that it's un-American. He, in this speech, defined the battle in class terms, really, saying there is no issue that better illustrates the divide between Americans, working class, and America's political class than illegal immigration. Wealthy politicians, he said, push for open borders while living behind their walls. The working class pay the price, reduced jobs, increased crime, and depleted safety net, said the president. He also made a point tonight to talk about the foolish wars that he has seen the country engaged in. Also talked, just for briefly, ridiculous partisan investigations, the only reference to the Mueller investigation that he made. Later saying that great nations do not fight endless wars. So the president, as he starts to leave the chamber, also had some pretty strong moments on the abortion issue, saying all children born and unborn are made in the holy image of God. You had this sort of back and forth, Brett, between the women wearing white outfits, the Democrats in Congress who at times sat on their hands during some interesting moments. But we did see a round of applause when the president said that America will never be a socialist nation. And Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, the senator and the Speaker of the House, both got up in unison to agree that America should never be a socialist country.
It was quite something. Let's just listen in for a second, see if we can hear some of these conversations.
Thanks.
Facing this divided Congress for the first time of his presidency, saying America expects Washington to govern, not as two parties, but as one nation. He spoke as obviously another government shutdown deadline looms closer. He spent a good part of his speech, as Martha just mentioned, pushing for border security, the specifics, defending the barriers, strengthening fencing, and yes, a wall. Interrupted 102 times by applause. Selective applauding, as you mentioned, from his Democrat opponents, dressed in white, many of them. He also, speaking, of course, in front of several potential 2020 challengers, Senators Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, who rolled her eyes, has already sent out a tweet raising money on that eye roll, Elizabeth Warren, just to name a few. Not surprisingly, they did not cheer that line that you mentioned. The only thing that can stop what he called the economic miracle in the U.S. are, quote, foolish wars, politics, or ridiculous partisan investigations, saying if there's going to be peace and legislation, there cannot be war and investigation. Foreign policy, he held true to what he really promised as a candidate, a new approach that great nations don't fight endless wars, and winding the speech on policy through personal stories, as really is now expected since President Reagan first mastered this technique. Emotional moments, the happy birthday song for the 81-year-old Nazi concentration camp survivor, ending saying, we Americans can do the incredible, defy the impossible. And in this town, many think it is impossible that these two parties can work together, but President Trump in this speech laying his marker down, asking lawmakers to choose greatness. Let's listen here.
Appreciate it. Mr. President, great job. Well done. With you, sir.
Got the kids here.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Great job. Knocked it out of the park.
Let's bring in our senior political analyst, Brit Hume, for some reaction. Brit.
Well, Brett, it was to me quite a striking speech. I've never been of the view that these State of the Union addresses last in the public consciousness for very long, but people may remember this one. I think it was the most effective use of the guests in the gallery that I've ever seen, especially toward the end when it became so emotional. And it was kind of a unifying moment because these were things that were being cheered and applauded that really no one could be against. I also thought the president did a good job of laying out his accomplishments. And when you hear them lined up as he did and recited that way, they are rather impressive, I think. And the speech looked to me as if it were designed to make it as difficult as possible, even for his opponents, not to applaud him. And in some instances they did. And as you all noted earlier, when he said we'll never be a socialist country, even Pelosi and Schumer had to cheer that, which must have been bad news for the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes and the Bernie Sanders of the world. So I think the president had a pretty good night. He needs to follow it up, of course, with some achievements: China deal, trade deal, and a deal on immigration and the wall. But I think he probably did himself about as much good as you can do with a speech tonight.
But, Britt, talk about the importance of these nights. I mean, obviously, there will be critics who say, listen, he was just reading off a teleprompter, speech was written for him. But stringing together all of this together where you have a direct megaphone to the American people is a big moment.
It is a big moment because it is such a big stage, and it is a vast audience. The coverage starts before the speech and lasts for quite a while afterwards. So it is a real opportunity. I just can't think of too many cases where I thought presidents did that well with him. I can only, looking back over 43 of these, I think I've covered in one way or another. I can only think of, certainly fewer than 10 moments from 43 speeches. This one, however, may leave an impression. Of course, it always seems like a big deal on the night it happens, but we'll see how it plays out. I think his speechwriters did a good job of making a speech that was not partisan, that had a unifying theme to it, and certainly had unifying moments within it. And all of that, I think, does the president a little credit. He's not been a unifying figure as president, but I think he reached for a unifying message tonight, and I think to a great extent, Brett, he had one.
In a couple of minutes, we're going to go to the Democratic response from the former Georgia House Minority Leader and 2016 Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams. But let's bring in our chief congressional correspondent, Mike Emanuel, who's standing by in Statuary Hall.
Martha, Brett, good evening to you. Stacey Abrams is seen as a rising star among the Democrats. She received a great deal of attention last year when she ran for governor, losing to Republican Brian Kemp. She's expected to talk about her experience in Georgia as the House Minority Leader there, talking about reaching across the aisle, doing the right thing for the constituents you serve, and making the case that is something we do not have happening here in our nation's capital. She's also expected to talk about success not being guaranteed in this country, but we live in a nation of great opportunity. Bottom line, Democratic leaders think she is a rising star, that she will deliver a great speech tonight. Democratic leaders, by choosing her, also avoided any controversy of seen as playing favorites with one of the 25 or so Democrats expected to run for president. Martha, Brett?
Mike, thank you.
Let's bring back our panel, Chris, Dana, Laura, Juan. Chris, quickly your thoughts before we hear Ms. Abrams.
Yeah, I'll reserve some time after Ms. Abrams.
We'll give it to you.
I thought it was a very well-written speech. I agree with you. There were some very moving moments. I think it was quite effective as an opening speech for the 2020 campaign. I want to talk about and explore that. I don't believe it's an especially effective speech in terms of trying to make legislative progress in 2019.
I think it was pretty pragmatic. I mean, there's a lot in this speech for Democrats, if they're looking at these objectively, which is hard even on a night like tonight, to like. I mean, Democrats have campaigned against these endless wars. Democrats have campaigned for better trade deals. Democrats have campaigned for more help for sex trafficking, the opioids, AIDS. I mean, I think on issue after issue after issue, there was a lot for people on both sides of the aisle to really love here.
Yeah.
Well, he's talked about what I like, the new standard of living for the 21st century. But I don't think he followed it up enough, and I hope that in the next few weeks maybe we see him do that. He gets out on the road. He's got a lot on his plate. But I feel like that was the way to not just open up the 2020 campaign, but to really look towards the future in a bigger picture way.
Quickly, Juan.
I thought it was a humdrum speech. I think that the big drama was I didn't see any Democrats walking out or being rude to the president. I think lots of Republicans thought it was going to be a contrast between a president who was preaching unity and Democrats who were acting up. Instead, what you saw, I think, was the big moment, the ladies in white, as compared to all the men who were in the Republican ranks.
All right, we're going to go now to Atlanta, where Stacey Abrams is giving her response.
I'm Stacey Abrams, and I'm honored to join the conversation about the state of our union. Growing up, my family went back and forth between lower middle class and working class. Yet even when they came home weary and bone-tired, my parents found a way to show us all who we could be. My librarian mother taught us to love learning. My father, a shipyard worker, put in overtime and extra shifts, and they made sure we volunteered to help others. Later, they both became United Methodist ministers, an expression of the faith that guides us. These were our family values: faith, service, education, and responsibility. Now, we only had one car, so sometimes my dad had to hitchhike and walk long stretches during the 30-mile trip home from the shipyards. One rainy night, my mom got worried. We piled in the car and went out looking for him, and we eventually found my dad making his way along the road, soaked and shivering in his shirt sleeves. When he got in the car, my mom asked if he'd left his coat at work. He explained that he'd given it to a homeless man he'd met on the highway. When we asked why he'd given away his only jacket, my dad turned to us and said, "I knew when I left that man he'd still be alone, but I could give him my coat because I knew you were coming for me." Our power and strength as Americans lives in our hard work and our belief in more. My family understood firsthand that while success is not guaranteed, we live in a nation where opportunity is possible. But we do not succeed alone. In these United States, when times are tough, we can persevere because our friends and neighbors will come for us. Our first responders will come for us. It is this mantra, this uncommon grace of community, that has driven me to become an attorney, a small business owner, a writer, and most recently, the Democratic nominee for governor of Georgia. My reason for running was simple. I love our country and its promise of opportunity for all. And I stand here tonight because I hold fast to my father's credo. Together, we are coming for America, for a better America. Just a few weeks ago, I joined volunteers to distribute meals to furloughed federal workers. They waited in line for a box of food and a sliver of hope since they hadn't received paychecks in weeks. Making livelihoods of our federal workers a pawn for political games is a disgrace. The shutdown was a stunt engineered by the President of the United States, one that defied every tenet of fairness and abandoned not just our people, but our values. For 7 years, I led the Democratic Party in the Georgia House of Representatives. I didn't always agree with the Republican speaker or governor, but I understood that our constituents didn't care about our political parties, they cared about their lives. So when we had to negotiate criminal justice reform or transportation or foster care improvements, the leaders of our state didn't shut down. We came together and we kept our word. It should be no different in our nation's capital. We may come from different sides of the political aisle, but our joint commitment to the ideals of this nation cannot be negotiable. Our most urgent work is to realize Americans' dreams of today and tomorrow, to carve a path to independence and prosperity that can last a lifetime. Children deserve an excellent education from cradle to career. We owe them safe schools and the highest standards, regardless of zip code. Yet this White House responds timidly, while first graders practice active shooter drills and the price of higher education grows ever steeper. From now on, our leaders must be willing to tackle gun safety measures and face the crippling effect of educational loans, to support educators and invest what is necessary to unleash the power of America's greatest minds. In Georgia and around the country, people are striving for a middle class where a salary truly equals economic security. But instead, families' hopes are being crushed by Republican leadership that ignores real life or just doesn't understand it. Under the current administration, far too many hard-working Americans are falling behind, living paycheck to paycheck, most without labor unions to protect them from even worse harm. The Republican tax bill rigged the system against working people. Rather than bringing back jobs, plants are closing, layoffs are looming, and wages struggle to keep pace with the actual cost of living. We owe more to the millions of everyday folks who keep our economy running, like truck drivers forced to buy their own rigs, farmers caught in a trade war, small business owners in search of capital, and domestic workers serving without labor protections. Women and men who could thrive if only they had the support and freedom to do so. We know bipartisanship could craft a 21st century immigration plan, but this administration chooses to cage children and tear families apart. Compassionate treatment at the border is not the same as open borders. President Reagan understood this. President Obama understood this. Americans understand this. And Democrats stand ready to effectively secure our ports and borders. But we must all embrace that from agriculture to healthcare to entrepreneurship, America is made stronger by the presence of immigrants, not walls. And rather than suing to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, as Republican attorneys general have, our leaders must protect the progress we've made and commit to expanding healthcare and lowering costs for everyone. My father has battled prostate cancer for years. To help cover the cost, I found myself sinking deeper into debt, because while you can defer some payments, you can't defer cancer treatment. In this great nation, Americans are skipping blood pressure pills, forced to choose between buying medicine or paying rent. Maternal mortality rates show that mothers, especially Black mothers, risk death to give birth. And in 14 states, including my home state, where a majority want it, our leaders refuse to expand Medicaid, which could save rural hospitals, save economies, and save lives. We can do so much more. Take action on climate change. Defend individual liberties with fair-minded judges. But none of these ambitions are possible without the bedrock guarantee of our right to vote. Let's be clear. Voter suppression is real. From making it harder to register and stay on the rolls, to moving and closing polling places, to rejecting lawful ballots, we can no longer ignore these threats to democracy. While I acknowledge the results of the 2018 election here in Georgia, I did not, and we cannot, accept efforts to undermine our right to vote. That's why I started a nonpartisan organization called Fair Fight to advocate for voting rights. This is the next battle for our democracy, one where all eligible citizens can have their say about the vision we want for our country. We must reject the cynicism that says allowing every eligible vote to be cast and counted is a power grab. Americans understand that these are the values our brave men and women in uniform and our veterans risk their lives to defend. The foundation of our moral leadership around the globe is free and fair elections, where voters pick their leaders, not where politicians pick their voters. In this time of division and crisis, we must come together and stand for and with one another. America has stumbled time and again on its quest towards justice and equality. But with each generation, we have revisited our fundamental truths, and where we falter, we make amends. We fought Jim Crow with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Yet we continue to confront racism from our past and in our present, which is why we must hold everyone from the highest offices to our own families accountable for racist words and deeds, and call racism what it is: wrong. America achieved a measure of reproductive justice in Roe v. Wade, but we must never forget it is immoral to allow politicians to harm women and families to advance a political agenda. We affirmed marriage equality, and yet the LGBTQ community remains under attack. So, even as I am very disappointed by the president's approach to our problems, I still don't want him to fail. But we need him to tell the truth and to respect his duties and respect the extraordinary diversity that defines America. Our progress has always been found in the refuge, in the basic instinct of the American experiment, to do right by our people. And with a renewed commitment to social and economic justice, we will create a stronger America together. Because America wins by fighting for our shared values against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That is who we are. And when we do so, never wavering, the state of our union will always be strong. Thank you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Stacey Abrams, the former minority leader in the Georgia state legislature, also ran for governor in Georgia, unsuccessfully, but she is clearly a rising star in the Democratic Party, someone who exudes confidence and is someone that the Democrats, I think, are putting a lot of hope in that she's going to run for Senate down in Georgia. Let's bring back senior political analyst Brit Hume. Brit, these responses are always really unenviable because they usually, you can never match the pomp and circumstance, the grandeur of the House chamber. Your thoughts on this and back to the big speech.
Well, it certainly was a contrast in the message between the president's optimistic report on the state of America and the quite grim picture that Stacey Abrams painted of where Americans are and how they're living. You would think we were in the depths of the recession, the way she struck it. You'd think from what she seemed to be saying about race that it was 1963 and so on. I found her a person with a lot of presence, and she certainly speaks very ably and well. I just wonder how her message will resonate with people out there living with record low unemployment, even among a number of minority groups where unemployment tends to stay high. So I think it was a nice try, but I have my doubts about how effective it was.
All right, Britt, thank you. As always, back with the panel. Chris.
It's a low mark because, as you say, these responses, both by Republicans and Democrats, are notoriously unsuccessful. I thought this was a pretty good one. And yes, while the macro numbers are pretty good, there are a lot of Americans who are struggling. And I thought she seemed to get more to what people's lives are like in the reality. Also, she talked about some subjects like education, which the president didn't talk about at all, or climate change, which the president didn't talk about at all. In terms of the president, as I say, I think it was a pretty effective speech politically and an opening salvo for 2020 after a 35-day shutdown. He talked about compromise and reaching across the aisle. He reached out to women. He got clobbered among suburban women in the midterm elections. And I think he appealed to his base on the wall, on right to life and abortion, and also on socialism. I don't see a lot of wiggle room. I know there's some issues that they may agree on, but on the specifics of those issues, like infrastructure, the Republicans and Democrats are miles apart. I don't see a lot of legislating coming out of this.
Laura, hearing that the president may continue this speech by going to the border in the coming days, not sure exactly on the timing on that yet, but how does he continue what he started tonight to build on?
I think one thing I remember from the Reagan years, after the State of the Union, the cabinet was dispatched. I mean, I was like a 22, 23-year-old speechwriter in domestic policy, and you would see them fan out after the State of the Union. So I would say people like Ben Carson, Rick Perry, who was a designated survivor tonight, but all the members of the cabinet, in their own way, have something to amplify from this message tonight. And that, if I could say there's a failing in the communications of the White House not to utilize some of these, there were some pretty powerful people in the cabinet. And Bob Lighthizer is busy on China trade. Mnuchin's, obviously he's busy. Nielsen's busy. But we got other people we don't hear a lot from. So that's when they can do it. I got to say, Stacey Abrams, I think she did have presence tonight. I think she much better than some of the people in the last few years.
Think about the past.
Oh my gosh,
Marco Rubio.
You know, in last
Bobby
year
Jindal.
with the sweating face, you know, that was a tough deal. So it's never easy to do these speeches, but. Look, I think she's kind of presenting an alternative universe to what really is going on. Blue-collar wages, as the Washington Post had to report in September, finally blue-collar wages are going up. The middle class is feeling it. So, but she did the best I think she could with this economy that's booming by all accounts.
Dana, I was trying to think of the president's speech, of key speeches he's delivered. I think Poland, Saudi Arabia, big moments. I think it seemed like he was the most comfortable. This speech was the most well delivered. So State of the Unions are tough, but this one really landed.
And this is his second one. And remember, also he knows a lot of the people in the room now. They've this disruptor has come in. People are a little bit more used to him now, and the disruptor. And he so effectively used the guests in the gallery. He also had a little bit of humor. There was a moment they sang happy birthday. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that. I do think it is remarkable that I think it's the first time in history a president of the United States had to stand on the floor of the House and say, we will never be a socialist country. And I think we should take that very seriously, and follow through is very important, getting the cabinet out. Azar has a lot to do on prescription drugs, etc.
Quickly, Juan.
Well, I think one of the measures in my mind is, does it move the needle? Remember when we talked about his presentation in the Oval Office on the immigration, the need for the wall, it really didn't move public opinion very much. It didn't raise, especially from his perspective, support that he had hoped. I think tonight, when I create a checklist in my mind. I think about immigration. Do I think that this persuaded anybody on the immigration issue or the wall? I don't. Do I think it persuaded anybody on abortion? I definitely think not. In fact, I think it may have alienated some. When I think of him saying this was a partisan investigation by Robert Mueller, again, I think, people think this is the Trump we know. To my mind, it was a real appeal to reach across the divide. And I also saw that, by the way, interestingly, from the other side, from Stacey Abrams.
Juan, thank you. Panel, thank you.
Final thoughts when we come back.